It was completely out of the blue. I had just gotten home after a hard day's work, expecting to catch my wife Nancy in the kitchen making dinner. Nancy worked, but she would get home at 5, and I didn't get home until 6 or so. She cooked the meal, we ate, talked about our day, watched TV, and then went to bed where, at least most nights, we made love. I walked into the apartment and found Nancy sitting on the couch with John Marcus. John was an attorney at the firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, where Nancy worked as a secretary. They were holding hands. Before I could ask what the hell was going on, Nancy said, "Sit down, Roy, we need to talk." "About what, Nancy, and why are you holding hands with your boss?" "That's what we need to talk about, Roy. Please sit down." "I'd rather stand." She looked at John, he nodded his head, and Nancy said, "It's not easy to say this, but the fact is that John and I have fallen in love, and I'm going to divorce you and marry John. John has taken care of all the paperwork, and all you have to do is sign it. I'm not asking for anything, just my clothes and jewelry and all that. Just sign, and it's all over in 90 days. John picked up some papers lying next to him on the couch, stood up and walked over to me, speaking. "Roy Dalton, you've got—" And that was all he had time to do before my right foot hit him right in the crotch. He dropped the papers he was holding and bent at the waist, reached for his balls with his hands, bent over, and I punched him hard in the jaw with my fist. He fell to the floor. "You miserable piece of shit!" I yelled, kicking him in the balls again. "It doesn't matter if she came after you or you went after her. You knew she was married." While all this was going on, Nancy sat there in shock, too stunned to even scream. I left John on the floor crying and holding his crotch, dragged Nancy off the couch and dragged her into the bedroom. She tried to run away from me with tears. "Let me go. Let me go, damn you." I pushed her face down on the bed, tucking her face into the pillow, and sat on her back, tearing the sheet. Using the torn sheet, I tied Nancy up and gagged her and then went out into the living room, grabbed John by the collar and dragged him into the bedroom, threw him on the bed, tied him up and gagged him as well. I stood there watching them and then started laughing. How about this? Lovers in bed together and the husband standing there watching? Is that perverted or what? While they lay there watching, I cleared the dresser and closet of my things and packed them away. I took a picture of the lovebirds on my cell phone and then said, "You're not going anywhere, you hear me?" I left them, and then in a hurry I took everything I wanted and could from the apartment and loaded it all into my truck. I'll be back later for more important things. I went back to the bedroom, picked up all the things I had packed, and carried them to the truck. Back at the apartment, I cleaned out Nancy's purse, taking all the money and credit cards, and then made one last visit to the bedroom. I stood there and watched them struggling, trying to free themselves. After a minute or so, I said, "When I get to the city limits sign, I'll call someone to get you rescued. If I'm lucky, I'll never see either of you again. On the other hand, maybe I'll wait until I'm 1,000 miles away to call. Once you're free, you'll only have to wait a year before you can divorce me for leaving you. You take care of yourself now, you hear me? Snuggle up to him and enjoy the time in his arms." Then I walked away and left them there. As I walked down the road, I asked myself why I was such a violent asshole. I realized why. If Nancy had come to me and told me she wanted a divorce because she had fallen in love with another man, I wouldn't have liked it, but I would have accepted that she didn't want to be with me. I could ask what I did to push her away, or what I lacked in her opinion, but I would just let it go. But confronting me in my own home with her lover holding her hand and saying right to my face, "Here are the papers, sign them," was too brazen for me to let it go. I expected dinner to be ready for me when I got home, and since it wasn't, I went into the village inn and had dinner. As I ate my dinner, I wondered why, if she was in love with her boss, she had me damn near to death right up until today's confrontation in our living room. I'll probably never know the answer to that question. I finished my apple pie and then called Julie, Nancy's sister. I told her that I had left her sister and her lover tied up in the bedroom of our apartment, and then hung up before she could ask me any questions. Hopefully my 1,000 miles away would make them think I was going out of town, and they wouldn't bother looking. In reality, I was only going to move to the other side of town. I left the restaurant and checked into the Quality Inn and called my boss at home. I explained the situation, arranged to take the next 2 days off, and then asked him to tell Nancy if she called him that I had come to work and quit without notice, mumbled something about Florida, and left. He said he would do it and then said, "You do realize that if you stay here, she'll eventually see you somewhere, or someone who knows you might mention seeing you, don't you?" "Yes, but I'm only doing this to stall for time. It may only take a day or two, but I'll take what I can get." I went to the bank first thing in the morning only to find out that Nancy had lied to me. All she needed was her clothes, personal items, and all that. I discovered that Nancy had been there the day before and had withdrawn half of the checking and savings accounts. I checked the safety deposit box and found that she had apparently forgotten about it. There were 6 certificates of deposit in there. Each was worth $12,000. They were supposed to be the down payment on the house. Each of us would put 10% of our net paychecks into savings, and then when the savings reached $12,000, we would buy a certificate. But what really had to gross her out was the jewelry box that was also in the box. The jewelry was in the box. They had belonged to her great-great-grandmother and had been inherited, and Nancy had gotten them when her mother had passed away from cancer. They were appraised at $82,000. The jewels were a bone of contention between Nancy and her sister Julie. Julie always argued that she should have gotten half, and Nancy always argued that it was hers since she was the firstborn and would in turn pass to her future daughter. Nancy must have been very, very angry when she remembered the jewelry box, opened it, and found it empty. I took the jewelry before Nancy discovered it was gone, and after letting her get a little nervous, I subsequently gave the jewelry to Julie. In the morning, I rented an SUV and waited until Nancy left for work, and then swung by the apartment to pick up the heavy items I needed. My key didn't work, and I cursed myself for not waiting until all the hardware stores were closed before calling Julie. But my name was on the lease, and I hadn't been served with a restraining order, at least not yet, so I had a right to be home. Getting in wasn't that hard. I'd have to pay the property management company whatever it cost to fix or replace the door, but at the time, that was the least of my worries. Everything I wanted, I took out of the house in 45 minutes, and an hour later I stashed it in a storage unit. While at the apartment, I used the phone to cancel our joint credit cards, called Megan at the management company about the door, and told her I'd call her back in a couple days to arrange payment. I had known Megan for years, so when she asked what happened, I told her the whole story. She laughed and said, "Really? You left them in bed together? That frees you up for me." "What about Mike? He pulled the same shit as Nancy. He hooked up with some whore he worked with and told me he loved her more than he loved me. Do you have my home number? When you feel ready, don't be afraid to call." "Thanks, Meg. I'll talk to you later." I went into the library and checked out half a dozen books. My plan was to hide away and do nothing but work during the day and read in the evening. If I was hardly ever on the street, there was little chance of Nancy spotting me, looking for me. I couldn't afford to stay in the motel too long, so I called Megan, and she pointed me to an apartment complex on the other side of town. She took care of me and called the apartment manager. I knew I was taking a risk by staying in the city. In some of my conversations with Nancy, as she talked about her work and the people she worked with, she mentioned that Marcus was approaching a partnership, and I was betting that Marcus would want to avoid the scandal that could happen if he filed assault charges against me. For one thing, it could have cost him the partnership he was hoping for, because it would have revealed that he was tangling with a married female employee. I'm sure he wouldn't want the partners in his law firm to cave in because of the possible negative publicity. I also thought he would discourage Nancy from filing spousal abuse charges for the same reason. Within 3 days, I had already moved into my new apartment. When I got to work, my boss told me that Nancy had called and that he had told her about my move to Florida. He said she exclaimed, "Damn!" and hung up. I couldn't keep from laughing when I heard that. Around 11, I called Megan to ask how much I owed at the door, but it turned out that Nancy had taken care of that. Then Megan asked me where we were going on our first date. I explained my plan to Nancy, and Megan laughed and said I was mean. Then she said, "You can come over to my house for dinner and we can talk about old times. That way you won't be glowering and she won't have the slightest chance to see you." "What time? Say 6 o'clock? As I drove to Megan's, I thought about her and how long I'd known her. We'd met sporadically throughout high school and had almost reached the stage of a permanent connection. I didn't realize she was back in town until the day I walked into the property manager's office to sign the lease papers for the apartment. But by then, I was already married to Nancy. I showed up at her apartment on time, sat down at the kitchen table, and we talked while she finished making dinner. She told me all about her move to Colorado when her father was promoted and how she hoped she could go back there someday. I asked her why she didn't just stay there if that's what she wanted. She told me that her father died in a work accident and her mother came back here. She was a loser and she needed me, so I came back with her. She's better now, but I can't afford to go to Colorado yet. I'm saving up my money, so maybe someday I'll be able to make that move. She wanted full information about Nancy, so I told her. She laughed and said I should have taken a picture of them, framed it, and hung it on the wall with the caption, "Doves resting after a hard day." I laughed and told her I had taken a picture of it on my cell phone right before I left. She looked at it and laughed until she fell over. We had a nice time, and I offered to return the favor and invite her to dinner at my place the next night. She said she'd love to come. The next night, I had dinner with Megan, and after eating, we sat on the couch and watched a movie. About halfway through the movie, I found us holding hands, and I have no idea how it happened or even when. I looked at her and found her looking at me. Have you ever wondered how things would have turned out for us if my dad hadn't moved us to Colorado? The day after I saw you when I came to sign the lease on our apartment. You want to see if there's anything left? I'd love to, but not until I get rid of Nancy. Why wait? If you're done with her, you're done with her. Maybe, but I'm still married, vows and all that. But she broke her vows and set you free. That's a nice thought, but I don't feel that way. Once I'm officially served and I sign the papers and send them back, I'll consider myself free of my vows. But it won't be easy. I loved that stupid bitch and I thought she loved me. While some people can turn off love as easily as turning off a light, I'm not like that. It's going to take me a little while to recover from Nancy. I have 8 years of what I thought were pretty good years left to bury. It's not going to be easy for me. I think the first step is to get all the legal issues out of the way. How long will that take? The paperwork is already drawn up, so I think all I have to do is be available so I can be served. I think the easiest way would be to just walk into the office where she works. But I don't want to do that, although I'm looking forward to it. And there's really no rush. We need to get to know each other again. It's been 12 years since we broke up, and we're different people now. And there's a pretty big elephant in the room. I was head over heels in love with Nancy and thought we had a great marriage until she ambushed me that night with her boss. You want to know what the catch is? The night before she ambushed me, we made love 3 times. 3 times, and she did it knowing what she was going to do to me the next day. She even kissed me goodbye and wished me a good day as I left for work that morning. Enough about that. I decided I wasn't going to hide from Nancy. Let her find me. So what would you like to do on our first date? Depends on when. Dinner and dancing if it's on a weekend. Dinner and a movie if it's in the middle of the week. Okay, how about dinner and a movie on Wednesday and dinner and dancing on Saturday? That's fine with me, but what are we going to do on Friday? We can talk about it on Wednesday. No, let's get this out of the way right now. How about dinner at my place on Friday? Is it too much for me to put myself to the test in such a short period of time? If it's my way, I'll still take up all your time. Then we'll meet on Friday. Wednesday's date went well, and I got a nice kiss when I drove Megan home at the end of the date. Since I changed my mind about hiding from Nancy, I showed up at the bowling alley on Thursday. As luck would have it, that Thursday night my team was facing a team that Nancy's coworker was on. I asked Melissa if she had any idea how long Nancy's affair with her boss had been going on, and I could see in her face that she knew, but she said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." You don't have to hide it, Melissa. Nancy and Marcus have already impressed me with it. Nancy wants a divorce so she can marry him. I'm just curious how long she's been messing with my head. I never had a clue until she hit me with this. Maybe 8 months. We all think she was crazy to give you up for that dirtbag. Is it true you kicked him in the crotch? I just smiled, but didn't answer anything. Melissa asked if I was going to fight the divorce, and I told her no. Why would I fight to keep someone who doesn't want me? When this is over, is there any chance I could be on the list when you go looking again? I'll keep you in mind, but I'm afraid it takes time, and I can't imagine a beauty like you still being around when the dust finally settles. They say good things are worth waiting for. Do you think you could work with Nancy if we could get together? I bet it'd be fun to watch her eat her heart out. It wouldn't take her too long to find out what a piece of shit Marcus is, and that she definitely screwed up by leaving you for someone like him. I hope you're right. I'd love to see that. It was a good night as far as I was concerned. The team won 2 out of 3 games, and I hit the jackpot with 217 in the second game, and my ego was rubbed off by a real hottie showing interest in me. My Friday date with Megan went well. Saturday? Not so good. After dinner at Duke's Steakhouse, we went to Buckskins for dancing. Buckskins was a country western-style place where a band played on the weekends. The band that night was Carlos Washington, and I was on the dance floor doing the cowboy cha-cha with Megan when Julie Myers, Nancy's sister, walked in with her current boyfriend and another guy I didn't know, and they took the table next to ours. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that as soon as they sat down, Nancy joined them. I had already decided not to hide the fact that I was in town, but the table next to me and my date? And where was John? Had she already dumped him? I assumed the unknown guy was her chaperone for the evening. I warned Megan of what we were about to face, and she laughed and said, "Oh boy, this is going to be an evening to remember." The music ended and we headed to our table. Nancy was sitting with her back to us, but Julie was facing us, and I could see the surprise on her face as we walked over to our table and sat down. Apparently, she had decided not to let Nancy know because Nancy never turned around. I had already decided to pay our bill and leave. The next tune was a waltz, and Julie and the other 3 got up with her to go to the dance floor, and that's when Nancy saw me. I saw the shocked disbelief on her face, but her dance partner took her hand and led her out onto the dance floor. She kept her eyes on me as she danced. The song ended, and the band announced that they were going to take a break. All 4 of them went back to their table, and that's when Nancy decided to get mad at me. "Who's your friend, Roy?" she said with heavy sarcasm on the word friend. "You remember Megan from the leasing office, of course." She looked at Megan and asked, "Do you date married men a lot?" Megan laughed at her and said, "Only with the ones who get thrown out by stupid wives." An annoyed expression appeared on Nancy's face at this answer, and then she said to me, "Why are you here, Roy? I thought you'd gone out of town." "I'm here to drink and dance. Isn't that what people usually come here for? And obviously I'm here, or you wouldn't be able to talk to me." "Where do you live?" "None of your damn business." "You still working at Stan's? Why don't you go back to your band, Nan? I'd like to spend some time with my partner." "God damn it, Roy, you know I don't like being called Nan. That's some tough shit, Nan. After the shit you and your mean boss put up, I don't give a shit what you like or don't like. Does John know you're seeing another man tonight? Maybe I should write him a couple lines and let him know." "That's not true. I came here for a drink or 2 with Julie and Randy. I didn't know Art would be with them." I called out to a neighboring table, "Hey, Julie, is this Art's date with Nancy?" "I'm not going to get involved in this, Roy. The fact that Julie doesn't support your story tells me all I need to know." "Damn it, Roy, I'm not crazy." At that point, Megan said, "Unless you want to enter a hair-pulling contest with me, you need to get away from me and my beau, now!" Nancy threw us an angry look and went back to her seat. Megan smiled at me and said, "I haven't had this much fun in a long time." The band came back and we went back to the dance floor and danced 2 dances, and when we got to our table, Julie and her band were gone. Megan asked, "Are you really thinking about telling her lawyer boyfriend about her and this artist guy?" "No. If she's cheating on him, he deserves it since he's a cheater himself. I mean, he did cheat, right? If, as she said, they just happened to be here, I'll let her think and sweat that someday I'll just tell him about it to cause friction between them. Maybe make him think about that old once a cheater, always a cheater thing." "You really do have a delightfully wicked mind, don't you?" I just smiled. I got a really hot kiss as I drove her home. As we drove, I wondered if something lasting with Megan could work out. We did have something in high school, but Was it more than just puppy love? The next day, I called Julie and asked her to meet me at Bud's bar after I finished work. I told you I don't want to get involved, Roy. I don't need you to get involved, Julie. I need to talk to you about something other than my current relationship with your sister. Okay, but no talk about Nancy and what you two are going through, or I'll get up and leave. You got it. I got to Bud's before Julie and decided the best way to handle the situation was to just hand her the jewelry box and leave. That way I wouldn't have to mention Nancy and cause Julie to flee. Julie walked in, looked around, saw me, and came over to join me. Knowing her usual drink, I had already set it on the table. She sat down, noticed the drink, took a sip, and then said, "Okay, Roy, what's up?" I put the box on the table in front of her. "What's this?" "Open it." She took another sip and opened the box. I saw the look on her face when she realized what was in front of her. She reached in and pulled out a diamond necklace and looked at it and said, "My mom used to let me wear it when I used to play dress-up when I was a kid. Where did you find it?" I explained how I got it and said, "I know you always felt you should get half of it when your mom died. Now you have it all. What you do is up to you. You can keep half for yourself and give the other half to your sister. Or you can keep it all for yourself. You can tell your sister, or you cannot tell your sister. When she finally remembers the safe and finds it empty, she'll come to me, and I'll tell her I pawned the jewelry." "Why didn't you pawn it?" "I couldn't do it, Julie. They're family heirlooms, and even if I pawned them to spite Nancy, it would be the same as stealing them from you, and you've always been good to me, so I just couldn't do it. To tell you the truth, Roy, I've always wished I'd gotten to you before Nancy did." She put the necklace back and said, "You'll never know how much I appreciate it, Roy. Stay in touch, Roy." And then she left. The very next day, Nancy showed up where I was working. She came up to me and said, "Where's my jewelry? How did you know I was here?" "When I found out you hadn't left town, I figured you'd be here. Where's my jewelry?" "I got rid of them." "You got rid of them?" "They were mine, Roy. You had no right to take them." "Of course I did. The money I got when I pawned them covered the money you took out of our accounts." "Money from our accounts? Wait, you pawned the jewelry?" "Uh-huh. Damn you, Roy, you had no right. You lied to me. You told me that all you wanted out of our marriage was your personal stuff, like clothes and jewelry and stuff. No mention of money. Horse shit, Roy. You should have known without me telling you that I should get my share of the money." "There's a lot of things I should have known, Nancy. Like my wife was a cheater, a traitor, but I didn't know that. And you didn't just take your share. At most, you were supposed to get half, but you took more than half." "I didn't do that." "There was $15,600.12, and you took $7,850. That's $49.94 more than half. I pawned your jewelry for that $49.94, and that makes us even." $49.94? My God, Roy, that jewelry is worth over $60,000. "What are you saying?" "Oh, well, my loss. I'll tell you what, the receipt says there's 60 days to buy it back. Actually, there's only 51 days left, but I'll make you a deal. I'll sell you the pawn shop receipt for $10,000. "Where am I going to get that kind of money?" "Ask your new man. Maybe he'll give it to you." "How about I just call the police and tell them you stole my jewelry?" "Go ahead. Do you have anything to indicate that there was any jewelry in the safe? Do you even have any documentation that you had any jewelry? Just get the hell out of here, Nancy." "This isn't over, Roy. Get the hell out of here or I'm calling the police. I'll turn you in for assaulting me and John." "Do that, and I'll sue John for alienation of affection and the law firm for not honoring its employment policies and allowing a relationship to develop between the manager, John, and someone he controls. Talk about you. Do you think John will ever make partner in this? You better just get out of here, Nancy, and don't piss me off any more than you already have. And remember, if you had told me straight out that you didn't love me anymore, I would have been hurt. But I would have just let you go and we could have avoided all this drama. Now go." She threw a quick glance at me and walked away. Did I believe she would let go? Of course I didn't. I knew Nancy better than she thought, and she wasn't going to let it go. She would try to find some way to get to me where I couldn't strike back, but I don't think she'll be able to do that. The next day, A man came into work and asked the receptionist to page me. I walked to the front of the building and Sally, the secretary, pointed to a man reading one of the many award plaques on the wall. I approached him and asked what I could do for him. "Roy Dalton?" "That's me." He handed me an envelope and said, "You have been served. Good luck." I opened the envelope and read the papers. They were pretty straightforward. It said pretty much what Nancy said they would have said the night they ambushed me. She didn't even ask for child support. I signed them, put them in a stamped envelope, and dropped them in the outgoing mail tray on Sally's desk. She asked, "Are you getting a divorce?" It looked like it. "Put my name on the list when you go looking again." "Are you serious?" "Absolutely." I wondered what other women saw in me that Nancy didn't. First Megan, then Melissa, and now Sally showing interest in me was a pretty good balm for my bruised ego. I called Megan and told her that I had been served and that, as far as I was concerned, I had been released from my vows. She would really like to invite me over to her place the next night for a celebratory dinner, and I told her it was a date. I was sitting in my house eating dinner at the TV when Julie called. "You're an angry man, Roy Dalton." "Who am I?" "I've spent the last half hour listening to my sister cry over what you did to her jewelry. She asked John for the 10 grand she needed to buy back the pawn shop receipt, but he told her he didn't have it and wouldn't have it until the next quarterly bonus payment, which was over 2 months away. She was in tears. She only had 50 days to redeem them, and she didn't know what she could do. I took pity on her and told her that I had them and that I would give them to her but keep the necklace. She jumped at it. So thanks to you, I have my necklace and my sister's eternal gratitude. Remember what I told you, Roy? Keep in touch, you hear me?" "Okay, sweetheart. Whether I did or not was pretty much up to Megan. Yes, we did have something going on at school, but was it just teenage awkwardness?" When I arrived, she was wearing a very revealing dress and sexy high-heeled shoes. The table was set with lit candles, a bottle of wine, and 2 glasses. "Your timing is perfect," she said. "Dinner is ready, and if you pour the wine, I'll bring it to the table." She set dinner, sat down, took her wine glass, and said, "I propose a toast to new beginnings." I raised my glass. Undoubtedly, the dinner was great, and the only thing missing was the romantic music in the background. Megan didn't give the slightest hint of how she expected to spend the evening. "Dessert will be served in the bedroom," she said when we finished dinner. As we undressed, she said, "This is what I wanted all those years before Dad got promoted." It was the first time I saw her naked. She was an extremely sexy woman. "Did you miss me?" I asked my right breast, and the evening continued onward. Twice missionary, shepherdess, and doggy. She wanted more, but there was nothing in me anymore. We fell asleep together, and from that night on, we were practically a couple. I say mostly because there were things we couldn't do because while I felt like I was free since I was served, I was still technically married. A couple times, Megan and I did run into Nancy when we went out drinking, dancing, or just out to dinner. Nancy kept her distance, although her facial expression was slightly hostile. A week after my divorce was final, I got down on my knees in front of Megan and asked her to marry me. I was in the basement working on the crib I was building for the twins who were to join us in about 3 months when the basement door opened and my wife said to me, "He's here, honey." I put my tools away, vacuumed up the sawdust, washed my hands, and then headed upstairs to have dinner with my father-in-law. When I entered the living room, he was sitting on the couch, and I saw that his wife had already brought him a drink. I joined him, and my sweetie brought me a beer, sat on my lap, and sipped her margarita while we talked, waiting for the turkey to ripen. The conversation was mostly about the impending arrival of the twins, whether we'd already picked out names and why we'd so stubbornly refused to find out the sex of these two before they were born. And then it, as it always, and I really mean always, happened, the elephant in the room was revealed. This time it was my father-in-law who brought it up. "No, have you heard anything about your sister lately?" "No, have you?" "No, I'm just wondering what's going on." "I'm not going to find out anything. I'll talk to her if she calls, but I'm not going to call her. All I know is what she told me the last time she called. She left him because of his constant cheating and is going to divorce him. Roy always claimed that either one of them would cheat within a year of marriage." My father-in-law looked at me and I just shrugged. I stroked her baby bump and said, "It doesn't matter to me because I won. I've got you." My father-in-law looked at me and shook his head. "I get more beer bought for me at the lodge hall because of you two. I'm probably the only father in the state who has a son-in-law who married both of my daughters. I don't understand, and it's probably best not to understand how you went from Nancy to Julie." "Julie? Yeah. I think I missed that part." When I proposed to Megan, she said no. It wasn't as direct, but it was still a no. She said she really liked me, and she liked what we were doing, but she didn't love me. I was disappointed, but not too upset. Eventually, I realized that I had done my best with Megan. We had something going on at school, so it should have started there, right? But it didn't. And that's probably no accident. Anyway, I got through it. For the next 2 months, maybe twice a week, I went to a bar like Buckskins, where there was music to dance to. One night I was at the Stagecoach Inn, and the band consisted of Jimmy Little and musicians from the Cattle Yard. I saw Julie Myers walk in and take a seat at the bar. The dance ended and I walked back to my table, and no sooner had I sat down than Julie came over and asked if she could join me. I motioned for her to sit down. She sat down and asked why I hadn't called. "Why would I have called you? I thought I made it clear when I told you I wanted to get to you before Nancy did. I emphasized that when I asked you to keep in touch." "Yeah, and if I did that and we connected, how would you be able to stay on decent terms with your sister? What about your father? Can you imagine him welcoming me back? I don't live my life to please Nancy or my father. Nancy had her chance and she blew it, so she can't forbid me from getting what she threw away. As for Dad, he can either be happy for me or get it over with. Now, to begin your courtship of me, I think you should ask me to dance." Nancy was not pleased, and Julie told her to buzz off. The surprise was her father. "I'm glad we can keep you in the family," is what he said when Julie brought me to his house for dinner one Sunday. 6 months after meeting at Stagecoach, I proposed. Julie said yes, and 3 months later, we were married. 8 months after that, I got the news that I was going to be a father, and 3 months after that, I found out I was going to be a daddy of twins. Was I happy? You bet.